Sirha TV pour cette dernière intervention de l'après-midi en compagnie de Jonathan Doughty, la société Coverpoint. Donc Jonathan est food consulting, c'est-à-dire qu'il travaille pour un certain nombre d'entreprises. Il travaille dans 55 pays dans le monde pour des restaurants, mais également pour des centres commerciaux. Les habitudes de consommation évoluent, les habitudes aussi d'acheter évoluent. Justement, comment est-ce que ces différentes habitudes se mixent entre elles? On va parler de centres commerciaux, on va parler de programmes de restauration. C'est une conférence en anglais pendant une vingtaine de minutes avec Jonathan.
Merci, Eric. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm well aware, obviously, that without any food and speaking in English, the audience isn't going to be that great. But what I want to do today is take a short while, about 20 minutes or so, to talk a little bit about the difference of food service in shopping centres rather than food service on the high street, in hotels and normal restaurants. Okay, so let's just start off with some principles. What we're going to talk about is one of the largest growth sectors in food service at the moment. Food in shopping centres. Now, it's hard to understand in the traditional world of any country that has been around for 200-300 years with traditional town centres and city centres. But what we have now is a world where a lot of the new development is in air-conditioned, created spaces. And that's where the new food service is appearing. It's not just about the street, it's about the location that the consumer goes to for their enjoyment, for their satisfaction and their entertainment. Okay, let's just look at shopping centres in general at the moment. Retail space is on the decline. For all the reasons that we know, the customer is deciding to buy their goods online and having them delivered. The demands for big space in shopping isn't what it used to be. So many of the developers are now trying to fill that space with extra food and creating locations that people want to go to, not just have to go to. So for them, it's about creating a social space where somebody happens to go shopping as well. And we say that food provides that social glue around the space. It gives you a place where you can meet, where you can enjoy, where you can eat and drink with friends and family. It's not just about a functional eating experience. We call them experience centres, not just shopping centres. So, food service is going up. We're seeing a big increase in the amount of space that is given over to restaurants, cafes, bars, coffee shops within the overall shopping environment. It's nearly twice the space that it was 10 years ago, and it continues to grow. Depending on where you are in the world, it is now representing large percentages because the consumer, every one of you can't eat online. You have to go to a restaurant. You have to go to a cafe. And whilst everything else can be done online, pretty much these days, you still have to physically consume food and drink. So, good news from a food service perspective, and certainly from an operator perspective, is that your need, people are going to need you more. They're going to want you more in more places than you are at the moment. And one of the projects we worked on recently was Marina Bay in Singapore. And it has over 130 food service offers from all around the world. And it is one of the principal reasons why people go to that project, because of the food and drink. Yes, they go to gamble. Yes, they stay in the hotel. Yes, they go to the theatre. But the reason they go there day in, day out is for the bars, the cafes, and the restaurants. Okay, so a simple chart, but a really important one. On the left-hand side, 20 years ago, food was about 3% of shopping centre space. It was tiny. It was the last thing you did. It was rubbish, poor quality. Now, we are looking at 15 and even 20% of the total space is food. If you go to China at the moment, they are building centres with 25%. Taiwan, the same. Hong Kong are looking at centres with much, much more food service than ever there used to be, because that's the reason why people go to those centres. They go for their office lunch. They go for their client dining. They go to meet their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their lover, their husband, or maybe all of them, in a shopping centre, in a restaurant, or in a cafe. It's a location where people meet. And we can't think of shopping centres anymore as being boring, grey boxes, because they're not. Some of the projects around the world that have been outstanding in delivering food, things like Marina Bay in Singapore, in Zaragoza, Puerto Venezia, a stunning project with waterfront. Eurovea in Bratislava, built on the waterfront of the Danube River. These are beautiful places to be, where if you're young, free and single, you'll meet beautiful people. And if you want a great meal, you've got a choice of 40 or 50 restaurants. Add on top of that the sort of locations you see in the Middle East, and they are incredible places to go. And in those regions, they're the only places to go, because the national brands and the international brands want to go in places where there is air conditioning, where there is comfortable space. They don't want to be on a noisy, difficult to get to street where it's 40 degrees outside and it's really hard to get to that location. Okay, so the other problem we've got in shopping is that good food is no longer enough. It's also about the experience, the way that it works. And the picture below on that screen, the lower one, is Zaragoza. And it has significant amounts of lakeside space. It has most beautiful leisure experiences as well, where people go there, and then once they are there, they decide which restaurant, what are we going to do, what sort of food are we going to eat. We call it the magic triangle, the relationship between food, between retail, and between leisure. And when you link those three things together, you end up with a space that people want to go to. They happen to be called shopping centres at the moment. So, we talk about shopping centres. The business change that needs to happen as an operator is quite strong. We talk about SPM, BLD, ADED. These are all phrases, but I want to talk you through these later because they're very, very important. If you, as a chef or a restaurateur, want to operate in a shopping centre, you have to understand what these things are about. Okay, so the world has changed. We all know it. People value money, but they also value their time. We spend those two things. If you're in a hurry and you have the money, you have somebody to clean your car. If you're in a hurry and you have the money, you have somebody to clean your clothes or your house. And if you've got a lot of money, you have somebody to go out and get your lunch and bring it back to you. So the key financial locations around the world that have amazing office buildings also have people who earn 200,000 euros a year and they never get their lunch. Somebody gets it for them. And the reason for that is that every minute they spend doing something else, they don't make money for their company. So we play the balance, time and money. If you're a little bit older, if you're retired, then you can afford to go to a restaurant at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because the food is cheaper, because it's empty. And if you don't and you can't, you pay the full price for the product. And these things actually change the way in which the customer comes to you and buys. So we measure the spend per minute. How long does it take to take money off people? Because in a shopping centre, if the queue is going out the door, as it was today, in many of these restaurants within the show, You don't want people to stay too long, and you want to take the maximum amount of money from them. That's why we measure it. The space is expensive, so you have to make it work. So, BLD, breakfast, lunch, dinner. We are all human beings. We all have the same approach to meals. We get up, we want to eat. We get to the middle of the day, we're hungry. We get to the end of the day, we want to eat again. How do we fill those gaps? If you're a restaurateur that only serves main meals, lunchtime and evening, how do you pay the rent when there's nobody with you in the morning because you don't do breakfast and you're not doing anything in the afternoon? You've got to be pretty good at running a restaurant to just make money off 2 meals a day. And that's the challenge. In shopping, that's the challenge, because 7 days a week, there are people in those centres. From 9 o'clock in the morning or later, there are people in those centres. So if all you do is serve them pasta at lunchtime onwards, you've missed 3 hours of your trading day where you can't make any money. So ADED, this is the best thing in the world. All day, every day. Have a restaurant concept that works throughout the whole day. It can do breakfast. It can do mid-morning. It can serve lunch. It can go into the afternoon. It can give you a great dining experience in the evening. You would say brasserie in this country. I would say ADED, because that is the type of restaurant that can change what it does throughout the day. It can become a different thing, but it never shuts until closing time, 11, 11:30, whatever it is. Okay, the day parts have changed. We talk about the way in which you have the peak and the trough, and there's lots of people and there's no people. We don't eat 3 meals a day anymore. You just watch the number of baguettes being sold. You watch your typical Paul in a railway station or an airport at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning. And we don't stick to breakfast, lunch and dinner anymore. We eat when we need to eat. We eat when we can. The big winners of that were the petrol stations, the railway stations and the airports. They all understood that they were there to service when people wanted to eat, not when they thought you wanted to have some food and drink. So you've got to ask yourself, which do you want to be, the peak or the trough? For me, I'd like to be both. I'd like to fill all of those, thank you very much, because that's where the money is. Okay, so where do we do food service in shopping centres? That picture that you can see there is on the roof of a building that has nothing else except air extraction units on it. But we built it because it's a private dining room that looks over the city of Stockholm. And at night, you go out of the restaurant, across a little walkway, up some steps into your own private little house where you're served dinner. And dinner there is nearly twice as expensive as it is in the restaurant. It's twice as much money, but it's booked out for 4 months solid because people want an experience rather than just being with everybody else. And that to me taught me a big lesson. Even in a country like Sweden, where everybody is very conservative, they still want to say, I've got a better seat than you've got. I'm sitting in a nicer place than you are. And it's a really strange thing. So, this is another one. This is a bridge. This bridge actually doesn't go anywhere. It only sticks out halfway over the river, Danube, in Bratislava. But we built them as part of the project to give a seating space so that people could sit and look at the river and be seen. These are, again, the most desirable seating areas that we have in that project. They're used all day, every day, when the weather is great. So, another one. This is a shopping centre, but they don't want it to feel like a shopping centre. So, as you would expect, they put some vehicles in there instead, some vans. We finished a project in the UK just recently which has 5 vans like the blue one there, where they cook food in them. There's actually a lift that takes people from the ground floor to the food court. Next to that lift is another one that takes vehicles from the ground floor to the food court. So you can do that. And there are guys there cooking burritos and tossing salads and making coffee and doing all sorts of things off the back of a vehicle. Because the customer wants experience. They don't just want food anymore. Some of the other things, the tools that we're using to help. This is an operator called Ham Holy Burger. And all of the ordering of the items on the menu is done via an iPad. 13% more average spend because the customer chooses. They don't have to wait for a member of staff. And surprise, surprise, like many things, when you choose, you spend more money. It's like on your credit card. When you're making the choice, you spend more. The food comes to you quicker, you drink your drink quicker, you therefore buy more food and drink. This is a technology table. It's a restaurant called Inamo, where you actually touch the table and the menu items are ordered and delivered from the kitchen straight to you. Not surprising, but the average spend in this restaurant is very, very good indeed, because most consumers, on average, drink 2.5 drinks. The average for the area in which this restaurant is 1.5 drinks. The speed of service is why they drink more, because when you want that extra glass of wine, you press the button, or that bottle of beer, you press the button, and it arrives. There's no delay waiting to say, excuse me, waiter, excuse me, could somebody come and serve? Doesn't happen. Automatic. So, the other thing that we're seeing is a change in format, and we thought we'd put a French one up there for you. But Paul, you know very well, France, there are hundreds of them. In the UK, they have now developed the restaurant format as well, because the consumer is telling them, we want to eat more. We don't want to just have a bread sandwich. We would like to sometimes have a meal, and so they've developed a restaurant format, trying to see whether they can take more money in the same amount of time. TGI Fridays, a company I used to work for in the United States 27 years ago, long time ago, they have developed a format for railway stations and airports now, where they guarantee to serve you in 20 minutes. In most TGI Fridays in the old days, you couldn't even get sat down in 20 minutes, let alone get any food and drink. But the vision for this company now is that they need to be in these locations because there are so many people who have so much money that they want some of that share. It's really important change. Can I ask the small audience, how many of those recognize which brand that seating area belongs to? Thank you, the young lady on the front here. It's McDonald's. But that's typical of what's happening in the world these days, where McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, they're all trying to change their look, feel, and impression because they need to. The customer wants something different. Every single brand is looking to try and engage more with the customer, to give them something more exciting and interesting. This is a bar in Stockholm that was built in the middle of nothing. It's a little mall space. It turns over, if you put it into euros, just under 3 million euros a year. And it's in the middle of downtown Stockholm. It's nothing, but it's interesting. Here's another. This is a current food court design. This is not what you'd expect of a food court. The furniture's comfortable. You'd actually sit there. The design's interesting. It's actually got a graffiti wall behind it done by the local school kids. It was done as a competition. These sorts of things are changing what you see in shopping. Does anybody know who that is? The Starbucks. That's who it is. That's the Starbucks. That's in the Netherlands. And again, it's a new format for them, but it's teaching the customer that they can give them a much nicer space than they were used to before. Not unsurprisingly, as Starbucks have changed what they're doing and improved what they're doing, so have their sales, because the customer is now getting more value out of the experience. Okay, so here's an interesting one. This is an area in a shopping centre where the floor started at one height and dropped to another height. And in the old days, what the architects and designers would have done was just put a ramp in to take you from one level to the other. What we decided to do was to put in a seating area that was steps with leather pads, with tables, and we turned it into a coffee shop, which was almost impossible to do if we'd kept a ramp in there. So we put the ramp down the side and we let the customers sit there. And it has become one of the great social spaces. It's a little town square. It's a little piece of social area for people now. This is the other thing that we have all got to get used to. The old days of shopping centres, you never saw the food. It was McDo. It was Paul. But it was limited displays, and that was it. The choice and variety was poor. Burgers, some salads, some bread products, some big restaurants. Now it's delicatessens, it's huge food. Merchandising is massively important because the customer buys with their eyes every single time. We know it when you walk around the show. We know it because that's how everybody who's selling food and drink merchandises it. So why don't people do it when you get outside? Big question for me. Okay. Another good example, displays not just of food and drink, but displays of everything. Displays of where the food is stored. Restaurants where you sit in front of the kitchen. You not only see the pizza being made, but you see the flour going into the pizza mix. You see the pasta being made. You see the food being finished for you. The display is no longer like a shop. It's also like the kitchen as well. And within shopping, that's actually really efficient because it also helps the customer to understand how good something is. That's why in most of the projects we work on, we don't have any glass windows because we don't want to put a barrier between us and the people who want to spend money. So, simply, food in shopping is growing. It's growing very quickly, it's very profitable, and there's an enormous amount of money to be made there. There are risks because the rent is high, and you have to pick the good opportunity that's there. But it's definitely worth thinking about. Thank you very much.
Voilà, merci beaucoup Jonathan Doty pour cette conférence. Merci beaucoup, les habitudes de consommation évoluent, vous l'avez compris. Merci à toutes et à tous pour ce premier jour du Sirha. Rendez-vous dès demain matin sur Sirha TV. Karine Tessandier abordera avec Michel Tanguy, bien sûr, les chiffres clés du Sirha et vous parlera de l'actualité du Sirha. Il y aura une table ronde sur les enjeux environnementaux pour la restauration collective, les gestes en pâtisserie, ce sera le geste du jour demain matin à 9h45 et une grande table ronde demain matin sur Sirha TV sur la cuisine collective et les nouvelles règles nutritionnelles en restauration collective. Entre autres, voici le programme du début de la matinée. Bonne soirée à toutes et à tous et à très bientôt sur Sirha TV.